Psychological stories in the world of anime and manga are few and far between, and that's not counting the good ones. Fans of this genre can probably use their hands and maybe their big toe to count them all. Liar Game is part of those. It's been part of them for nearly 2 decades. A story about deceit, about a shadowy organization gathering individuals to compete in games where lying and backstabbing are expected and encouraged. No killings though, just a lifetime of death. So with the anime adaptation announced, you'd imagine the title would become quite anticipated for the spring season, especially since there aren't any series that stand out in particular, other than sequels. What the fuck is this? Granted, the story has a somewhat slow start, in the sense that the introduction is quite uninteresting although necessary, and has aspects that can make or break someone's viewing experience. Wink wink. The manga started in 2005, a long time ago. The story structures back then were a little bit more methodical and ultimately slower, compared to today where you either go big and flashy in the first episode or you miss out on a large part of your audience. And it's really noticeable with Liar Game. It's not like things don't happen, they do, it's that they are not presented in an interesting way to keep someone engaged, and that is really the elephant in the room here. But we'll address it later because for now there's another, smaller but temporary elephant in the room by the name of Nao Kanzaki. Nao Kanzaki is our protagonist, a person honest to a fault, so honest that her name means honest, sometimes even comically honest and naive, the type of person who would take a 100 yen coin, which is roughly $1, to a police station so it can be returned to its owner. Something admirable of course, but inevitably comes with a detrimental flaw. She is gullible, so much so that when someone told her to wait for them in a specific place, hoping she would take the hint and leave, she waited the whole day. Because of that aspect of her personality, she struggled to make any genuine friends throughout her life. The only person close to her is her father, who's on the brink of death with terminal cancer. There is a loneliness that surrounds her, but nevertheless, she's set on living a normal, peaceful life. Until she receives a package containing 100 million yen and an ominous letter inviting her to participate in a malicious game of deceit centered around money. Oh, so it's like Squid Games? No. Although they share similarities in the sense that most people who participate in the games do so for money. So they are ready to scam, lie and deceive in order to get their hands on the other people's money. The games are also built entirely around human reasoning, strategy and the darker side of human behavior. There's no killing here, just a lifetime of death, which might as well be killing. But Nao is the odd one because besides the fact that she doesn't need the money, she lacks the qualities to participate in the game. Makes you wonder, why was she chosen? But before she can break it down, the first game begins. Nao and her opponent both have 100 million yen each. Whoever manages to steal money from the other over the course of 28 days gets to keep their 100 million, while the other goes into debt. A pretty intense game to start off, but by some miracle it turns out that Nao's opponent is her favorite teacher from middle school, a kind-hearted man who was like a father to her. She gets in touch with him and after discussing the situation over a drink, they decide it's best to store their money in Fujisawa's bank safe. Yes, I saw it, my mother saw it, my grandma saw it, everyone saw this scam coming a mile away. Only Nao didn't. And this is one of the problems. At least early on, and by that I mean until the contraband arc, which may or may not be part of the first season of the anime depending on how many episodes it will have. Obviously, the idea behind Nao's character is to have a naive and honest character thrown into a pit of vipers. How would someone so unquestionably be trusting fair surrounded by deceitful people? There's a clear progression path laid down for her. Her virtuous morals are constantly questioned and challenged throughout the games, which will force change. She will grow, she will get smarter, she will even come up with some interesting plans and tactics that will even challenge the smartest people in the games. I know, because I read the manga a while ago. But until then, she can be very annoying because of how gullible she is. This doesn't make her a bad character, the point at which she changes will surprise many people, but this is her personality, and it's a matter of liking it or not. In a battle of wits, you want to watch a witty character, no? Not someone ordinary. Imagine if, in Death Note, instead of Light vs L, we had Matsuda vs L. Not much of a contest. Now, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Nao gets hard carried by her more charming partner, Akiyama, the type of character you would imagine in a game of lies. Typically, with smart characters like Light, Lelouch, Ayano Koji, they are portrayed as larger-than-life people with incredibly ambitious goals that have the skills to back them up. Akiyama, on the other hand, is a down-to-earth guy with an understandable motive grounded in personal loss and capabilities rooted in his knowledge of criminal psychology and life experience. One of those life experiences is what caused him to become a con artist and also why he agreed to help Nao. He was raised by his single mother, who worked hard to offer Akiyama a good, honest life, but unfortunately fell victim to an MLM scheme. In order to avoid passing the debt to Akiyama, she committed suicide, which is what pushed him to take down that business and why he doesn't want to let another innocent person, like Nao, fall victim to a con. But he isn't some incredibly intelligent guy. His plans aren't flawless and often come with consequences. He took down the business that scammed his mother, but he also ended up in jail. Also, throughout the liar game, his strategies and schemes won't always work, so he isn't this perfect guy. But he's surely more enjoyable to follow than Nao, who falls apart a few times per episode. The story is told mainly from Nao's point of view. We don't know what happens in Akiyama's mind, therefore we don't have any insight into his schemes. Nao is left in the dark until the moment of reveal, and so are we. At least until a specific arc in the series, which is why, liking Nao or not is a big part of someone's enjoyment. And I think this is quite clear in the conclusion of the first game. Akiyama recovers the money from Fujisawa, essentially saving Nao from a lifetime of debt, and as previously agreed, she splits the money 50-50 with Akiyama. Nao is happy that it's all over and she's no longer part of this malicious game. Fujisawa, on the other hand, is left with a massive debt to the liar game organization. We don't know what that specifically means, but we know that for an old man with no job, it's fucking over. What Nao does next though cements her importance in the liar game. She gives Fujisawa all the money she's won from the game, all her 50 million yen. After being manipulated and betrayed, she still chooses to forgive Fujisawa. And this right here is her philosophy. She believes that no human heart is evil. This philosophy will shadow her throughout the entire story. She will try to save people trapped in the liar game. But will she manage that? Will she manage to keep her conviction? So the temporary smaller elephant in the room won't actually be a big problem. Nao is introduced with a very specific weakness. She will have it for a while. Let's see how she grows out of it. Yes, you may not like her now, but being a foolishly honest character in a game of lies is detrimental to this story. I would tell you to have some bloody patience, but is that patience worth it in the context of the anime? I don't want to hear or see anybody defend Madhouse over this clearly outsourced garbage adaptation they made. Just look at the credits. Do any of these names look Japanese to you? This is yet another Madhouse work outsourced by Studio Dr. Movie. Genuinely, what's the point of this kind of adaptation? People who have never heard of the manga will watch one episode, see how trashy it looks, and then never think about it again. If you are a fan of the manga, you cannot tell me that you are grateful for an adaptation even though it is horrible. Look, 90% of the manga is talking heads, so even though it's an anime adaptation, it doesn't necessarily need a great deal of animation, although that doesn't mean it wouldn't benefit from it. But even setting the animation completely aside, do you know how many panning shots are in, let's say, episode 2? 95% of the episode is made out of panning shots. I'm not joking. There is a 5% minimal and scuffed body movement and the rest are still images. Still images with moving mouths. The colors are also flat and faded. The only time they change is when we get the occasional desperation shot. You know, when they use a generic darkish background behind the still image. The character designs, man, I know it's an old manga, but could Madhouse really not alter them slightly to make them fit into the shots? Nao has such a narrow head that whenever she's alone in a frame, the whole frame looks narrow. Oh, guess how long Akiyama's chin is? Sometimes it looks normal, sometimes it's 1 meter long. If you genuinely think that they couldn't do much visually because the manga is mostly dialogue, then I want to bring up a series very dear to me the Monogatari series. What stands out about the Monogatari series, or maybe what's peculiar about it, is that 95% of it's just dialogue. The light novels, bar one or two, are mostly dialogue. There's very little description, so little that even the protagonist Araragi isn't described at all throughout the multitude of stories he's part of. I mean, there's a whole story where the author describes absolutely nothing. So how do you adapt that into an anime? I mean, what do you even adapt? Well, Shaft said, "Hold my beer, kid," and delivered the... Okay, maybe not kid. Retake. Well, Shaft said, "Hold my beer," and delivered a phenomenal adaptation just by being creative. With no crazy budget, no flashy animation, Shaft used their artistic direction to make the Monogatari series a visual masterpiece. Take a look at how they adapted a simple phone call. We have two characters, Kaiki and Hitagi, having a phone conversation. Now, in the light novel, this is just dialogue on page and nothing else. But look at how they adapted that. I'll just play a short clip for you.
何？そうなのか。
ええ。
そうか。なんとなく分かってきたよ。お前の置かれているわけのわからない状況ってやつがよく正気を保っていられるな。
They constantly change the angles of the shots, mess around with colors. There's a zoomed in shot very close to Kaiki's eye, then a zoomed out shot depicting the location of Kaiki. The characters barely move. I mean, we don't even see Hitagi. There's only Kaiki climbing what? 4 steps? So there's little animation, if you could even call it that, but look at how it keeps you glued to the screen, giving you this feeling that you might miss something if you're not paying attention. This is what I mean by creative adaptation. You take a scene that's just a conversation and you turn it into something visually engaging. I'm not saying that Madhouse should have done this with Liar Game, although, why the fuck not? My point is that even with budget constraints, a little bit of creativity can really elevate an adaptation. And what about the atmosphere and direction of the anime? That is not tied to the budget at all. There is this anime called Higurashi, an adaptation with piss poor budget yet such an incredible soundtrack that it makes me feel whatever they wanted me to on command. Now all falls apart quite a few times throughout the first game, but let me ask you this. Have you felt any of that? Have you felt any sadness for her when she begged Fujisawa for help just before the game ended? How the fuck could you when this is the scene they came up with? Honestly, this is just My Home Hero all over again. An incredible manga with one of the best cat and mouse games ever, which got a garbage adaptation to make sure it wouldn't get the exposure it deserves. Honestly, if you can't be bothered to read the Liar Game manga, you should watch the live action adaptation. It's 100 times better than whatever this PowerPoint presentation is supposed to be.
It's embarrassing. It's a disgrace. That's what it is, a disgrace.